Hello, learners. So, a brief lecture on surfacing as a post-colonial text for today. So, I'll share my slide from the beginning. Okay, first of all, you must know the story of surfacing, how the narration takes shape. So we have an unnamed narrator, a female unnamed narrator as the protagonist. She visits her native state, native city, Quebec, where she was born and brought up. And she visits it with her boyfriend, Joe, and they were accompanied also by David and Anna. Actually, in the novel, it is portrayed that in David and Anna's car, uh, the unnamed narrator and her boyfriend Joe, they travel. So Joe and David, they are shooting a random film, a film with no plot, no story, no context. Context is there. Okay, they are shooting random images, random movement, random images, random incidents, and they are titling it as random samples. So it is like a fragmented and like a patchwork. Okay, so now in the novel, the narrator goes looking for her missing father in Quebec. This is one of the reasons for her arrival in Quebec. So after her mother's death, she was not a frequent visitor of her father, and she keeps looking for him. She keeps looking for clues in his cabin, which was situated beside a lake. She also talks to the neighbors of her father, Paul and Madame. Okay, and she witnesses there is too much of Americanization of Quebec, and she is haunted with the memories, the traumas of her past, the unpardonable sin which was tagged by her father and mother, her parents, that sin which she had committed by leaving her husband and son. So they termed it as unpardonable sin. So then the unnamed narrator has issues with building relationships and staying relationships, showing love, showing emotions, and she feels that her boyfriend Joe likes her more when she is not showing emotions. Her brother's death by drowning when she was a child, that is also haunted, um, and that also haunts her. Then the missing father is again adding up to her trauma. And the dead body of her father, when it is discovered, after that she goes into a kind of madness. She becomes wild and starts hiding in the wilderness amidst the trees from Joe, David, and Anna as they were ready to leave Quebec because uh, they got to know that uh, the narrator's father has died, so their purpose ended there. Now, also a little bit of information that David uh, David and Anna, they are married, and David had compelled Anna to be naked and to come into the film shoot of random samples. So there is some kind of gender oppression is also there as a post-colonial text. In a post-colonial text, this is not a conventional post-colonial text, but again, uh, the dominance of man on nature and women can be grappled. Then the unnamed narrator goes on to eating disorders. So there is, episodes of trauma there is episode of a loss. Now, the loss is more associated with cultural loss, okay? And the trauma is associated with her past, with her childhood, with, with her mother's death. Then, after, she goes wild, as I said, before she goes wild, before she loses herself, she breaks away the camera, which had all shots of their film, random samples. She breaks away that camera. This is again a sign of reclamation of freedom. Then Joe comes looking for her after a few days, and she realizes at the end that she's attaining a kind of liberation from Cubic, also from her past, from her trauma. And she realizes that at least for now, someone has come looking for her. Maybe Joe never left Cubic, maybe Joe stayed back for her. And she realizes that she loves him. Okay, so this is a very brief and general summary of the story surfacing. Now, if we have to problematize surfacing, how is it a post-colonial novel? Because many times in the class and many times I have mentioned that it is not a post-colonial novel in conventional sense. So you see, Quebec has, experienced the landscape, the natives of Quebec, okay, the natives of Canada. They were actually, they were actually colonized by French and then the British. And then uh, centuries later, there is too much of immigration. There is too much of migration, sorry, too much of migration of Americans into Quebec. So Quebec's native culture has been marginalized, and there is a cultural dominance of America on Quebec. Okay, there is multiculturalism, but there is loss of native culture. There is a assemblage of French, English cultures, to some extent native, but it has been marginalized. Okay, so there is hybrid identity. The unnamed narrator has hybrid identity. She is her mother never knew how to speak in French, but she was a native of Quebec, but her father was half American. So, and then when she goes back to Quebec, she tries to complete herself. She tries to locate her identity by having a sense of place, by locating her roots, indigeneity. But then that brings back her memories of past. And then she's resisting to gender oppression, any sort of oppression. She's just trying to break free. So the novel starts with her, admiration of the white birch trees of Quebec, but they are all dying. So the if we can juxtapose that how nature is depleting, how nature is at loss because of man's desire for success, for development, for growth, to possess, of possession more and more. And in a way, they are possessing women also. So, you know, you can place gender oppression as part of post-colonial context by relating how men for centuries have dominated nature and they have dominated women. Okay. Now, I have given you some important lines from the novel. These are not just the only important lines, but there are many more important sentiments of the unnamed narrator, and the novel goes on in first person. This is an account of the narrator, the unnamed narrator. So, yeah, so as she begins, twisting along past the lake where the white birches are dying, the disease speeding up from south, and I noticed they now have seaplanes for hire. So, the kind of uh, mechanisms, the kind of machines now humankind is having. This is a sign of dominance of nature. So, post-colonial literature also, you know, deals with how uh, nature has been otherized. Okay. Then next line, when they travel in David and Anna's car. So she expresses an accumulation of sheds and boxes. This is how she remembered the city. Okay, an accumulation of sheds and boxes, one main street with a movie theater. The oil red are burnt out, and two restaurants which served identical grey hamburger steaks plastered with mud gravy and canned peas, watery and pallid as fish eyes, and French fries, bleary with lard. So there was not many restaurants. There were only, sprouting American culture. There was only, the American culture was not very dominant, but it was taking hold of the place. Okay, so food is again another dimension in post-colonial context. Okay, there is loss of language, there is loss of traditions, there is a loss of stories, folklore, and there is a loss of, when I say loss of culture, within the parameters of culture, there is dress habits, language, there is beliefs and values and traditions. So it's all lost now. Okay, it's not prevalent anymore. Okay, Quebec's native culture is not there anymore. In the first few hours of driving, we moved through flattened cow sprinkled hills and leaf trees and dead elm skeletons. So the metaphor of death, is also expressed through the dead elm skeletons. So her brother's death, her mother's death, her father's death, and all these deaths you can literally associate with dead elm skeletons, and also as a post-colonial text you can associate the metaphor of dead elm skeletons with a dead native culture of Quebec, Canada. Then into the needle trees and cutting dynamited in pink and gray granite, and the flimsy tourist cabins and the signs saying gateway to the north. At least four towns claim to be that. The future is in the north. That was a political slogan once. When my father heard it, he said there was nothing in the north but the past, and not much of that either. So they have lost their past. Quebec is in the north. So they have lost their past, and people, especially people from the south, that is America. Okay, if you look at the maps, you will see that below Quebec there is America. So people started to move from south to north in search of better prospects, better land, better vegetation. So that is why people colonize other countries, other cities. They keep on traveling, but then imposing the dominant culture is what colonization starts with. Okay, so this is again another example or instance of the legacy of colonization. Okay, now out of these two examples, let's have a look at the last bulleted example. It's an imitation of other places, more southern ones, which are themselves imitations, the original someone's distorted memory of a 19th century English gentleman's shooting lodge. So, they go to a restaurant where the restaurant owner, Claude, he serves a beer to them. And she notices that Claude's restaurant has a painting, okay, which is an imitation of other places, of southern places. Okay. So again, the English culture is more, more overshadowed, is more dominant. And that is also again an imitation. So we get to see here how mimicry is functioning. We are mimicking. Everyone is mimicking a particular culture, and that particular culture is the dominant culture. People nowadays wearing t-shirts written with "I love NYC" in India. So that is quite absurd, because the person may not have gone to NYC ever, or might have just looked at NYC through pictures or movies. Okay, but in Indians, I have never seen wearing Indians flaunting t-shirts written "I love Bangalore" or "I love India." They only become Indians with their with wearing shades of tricolor when it's 15th August or 26th January. Anyway, so these are very debatable topics. You can have a debate on it later on. So there is always a mutual intimacy with land and body. So again, in this text, in this novel, we get to see that how the unnamed narrator is associated with the landscape, and she expresses her wild side by stripping off her clothes and getting into the forest. Okay? And she remains hungry. She doesn't eat for days. And she feels that Quebec has lost its previous uh, you know previous beauty of previous beauty of a thriving flora and fauna. Okay, so she is, when the land is at crisis, her body is also at crisis. Subconsciously, her trauma triggers. Okay, but these are all metaphorical, because you know her loss is very much connected to the loss of Quebec, to the loss that the natives of Quebec witnessed, to the continuous displacement, to the lack of a sense of belongingness. So there is a constant othering of the environment and othering of women. As I mentioned earlier, that Joe is, Joe keeps on, checking if if the unnamed narrator is showing any emotions, or, David's oppression, David's psychological violence on Anna. So these are just some examples of otherization. Then, yeah, this is also important. So post-colonialism, and see, surfacing as a post-colonial text makes us aware that how environmental changes are happening, degrading because of human activities, anthropocentric and anthropogenic activities, and which prioritizes humans' interest over the other. Okay, and also you know how Quebec has been fragmented now, how Quebec has been, has become a patchwork now. Now, can we call Quebec as a third space, an in-between space? That's again a food for thought. Is Quebec a third space? Yes, it is, where hybridity exists, which tries to, challenge the dominance of American culture. The unnamed narrator visiting Quebec is again a sign of Quebec being empowered. Okay, is again a metaphor of Quebec, uh, trying to locate, trying to, again erect, trying to again, raise awareness of its heritage. Okay, so as the unnamed narrator goes back to her past, keeps recalling what she used to do as a child. Hmm? So reading survival magazines. So all these episodes of memories and traumas, okay, is also a part of uh, Quebec's empowerment, because their named narrator is a native of Canada. Then socio-political differences are there between Americans and French. That is why Quebec is a third space. And how is it challenging cultural codes? How is it challenging the presumed cultural identity or the imposed cultural identity? Because the narrator, the unnamed narrator, is representing the current state of Quebec. It is she represents how, there is dominance, how there is dominance of nature. There is a control of nature. Trees are being cut down more and more. Restaurants, more hamburgers, more, uh, you know, loss of native food, loss of native culture. Now, depleting cultural memory and depleting ecology. This is again a valid point of observation in surfacing. And the unnamed narrator, as I have underlined this line, that the unnamed narrator, uh, you know, expresses her loss, her dissociation from Quebec tales and children's book and everything else. So in that everything else, what do you think all is there? What do you think? So the books are not there. The folk tales is a big part of cultural identity, and the narrator has to come away from those folk tales and children's books and their traditions, their rituals, their customs. So, the French settlers used to force the native Canadians to to burn their books. They used to, ask them to pile up all the books in a heap, and they would just lit them on fire. So it's a very miserable, um, miserable, tragic, uh, you know, process of colonizing, colonization, and this part of colonization. We know mostly about how India was under colonial rule, Africans were colonized, the atrocities on Afro Americans, but uh, not much focus, not much attention has been given on the natives of Canada. What was their culture like? Okay, so that's all. I hope you enjoyed. You have some points to think about, to ponder on about this lecture. Um, See you next time. Thank you. Have a good time ahead.